Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Allahumma alimna ma yanfa'una wa anfa'na bima 'allamtana wa zidna 'ilma. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Continuing inshallah where we left off in Aqeedatu Waasitiyyah. So we reached the section which says ذكر مجيء الله لفصل القضاء بين عباده على ما يليق بجلاله. We will speak here in this section about those ayat which affirm Allah's maji' and His ityan, Allah's coming on the Day of Judgment. That Allah comes on the Day of Judgment to the people to do al-qada between them, to give judgment between them. So He says, وَقَوْلُهُ, Allah said in the Quran, هَلْ يَنظُرُونَ إِلَّا يَأْتِيَهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي ظُلَلٍ مِّنَ الْغَمَامِ وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ وَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ. So the first ayah which affirms this maji', this coming of Allah, it is the ayah where Allah says, هَلْ يَنظُرُونَ إِلَّا يَأْتِيَهُمُ اللَّهُ. Do they wait for anything except for that Allah's يَأْتِيَهُمْ comes to them, Allahu فِي ظُلَلٍ مِّنَ الْغَمَامِ وَالْمَلَائِكَةِ in shades of al-ghamam, meaning al-ghamam means as-sahab al-abyad, white clouds, wal-malaika, and the angels come as well, wa qudiya al-amr, and the matter is decided. And here the word yanzuruna, it means yantadhiruna, they wait for. So nadhara in the Arabic language can mean to wait for something. If you say nadhara ash-shay, he waited for the thing, just as how you would say intadhara ash-shay, he waited for the thing. And it can also mean to look or to see something. That's if it's used with the harf, the particle ila. So when you say nadhara ila ash-shay, it means he looked at something. So therefore, in this context, we can see that nadhara here means to wait, as opposed to other contexts. For example, where Allah just says, وَجُوهُ يَوْمَئِذٍ نَاظِرَةٍ إِلَى رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٍ, that faces will be on that day brightened, إِلَى رَبِّهَا, to their Lord, they are نَاظِرَةٍ, they are looking. So there it's clear that نَاظِرَةٍ means to look, whereas here it is to wait. And this is because I am mentioning this because some of the groups, such as the Mu'tazila, who reject the ru'ya of Allah, seeing Allah on the Day of Judgment, they said that إِلَى رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٍ means إِلَى رَبِّهَا مُنْتَظِرَةٍ, they wait for their Lord. But this isn't something which the Arabic language supports, because نَظَرَ, if it's used with the particle إِلَى, then that means looking, and it doesn't mean waiting. In any case, so here in this ayah it means هَلْ يَنظُرُونَ, are they waiting for إِلَّا أَنْ يَأْتِيَهُمُ اللَّهُ, for Allah to come to them. This is from مَجِيء Allah and إِتْيَانِهِ, Allah His coming. And this is from صِفَاتُ الْأَفْعَالِ, from the actions of Allah that He does, as we will also mention later on, the actions of al-istiwa, of rising above the throne, and nuzul, and descending, and other than that. And a few principles to remember here. Firstly, the howness of this is majhul, just as how Imam Malik was asked about al-istiwa, how does Allah rise above the throne? He said, al-istiwa ma'lum, wal-kayfu majhul, was-su'alu anhu bid'ah. That istiwa, it is something which is known, and its howness is unknown, and asking about it is an innovation, it is misguidance. So like that we say about all of the sifat of Allah. And this does not necessitate anything which is unbefitting of Allah. Rather, as we said about every other sifat of Allah, that it is in a way befitting of Him. Likewise we say in these sifat. And it doesn't even mean, for example, al-mukhalata or al-mumazajah, that Allah enters into His creation. No, that's not what's intended. For Allah is above His creation and beyond His creation, and muhit bihi, and encompassing of all of His creation. But He does ityan, coming in a way which is befitting of Him. Its howness is unknown to us. And even in a practical sense, in like what we can see in our world, coming to something doesn't mean entering into it, or it doesn't necessitate that. If you said I came to the masjid, it doesn't necessarily mean you entered into it. Rather it means that it is al-iqtirab wa dunu, closeness, in terms of the two existences, or the two things. So when Allah does al-ityan on the Day of Judgment, that does not mean that He enters into the creation. Rather, Allah is muhit, He is all-encompassing, and He is al-a'la, and He is the Most High. But it's a way which is befitting of Him. It says, إِيَّأْتِيَهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي ظُلَلٍ, min al-ghamam. Al-dhulal min al-ghamam, as we mentioned, in clouds, white clouds. And the fi here, it doesn't mean dharfiyyah, to be in. Rather, al-fi here, the harfu fi, it means al-musahaba. These particles in Arabic language can come with different meanings, and the meanings are understood based on the context. So it means أن يأتيهم الله مع ظلل من الغمام, that Allah comes to them with clouds. And is mentioned by Al-Hasan al-Basri that these clouds تكون حجاب الله يستره عن العيون, that these clouds, they will be the barrier from which the people not be seeing Allah Azza Jal. Because seeing Allah on the Day of Judgment, as we will speak about later, it's something which is affirmed for the Muslims, that they will see Allah Azza Jal. But as for the kuffar, they will not be seeing Allah Azza Jal, and that is a form of punishment for them, as we will mention later on. And also Abu al-Aliyah, one of the tabi'een, he mentioned about this. He said, تأتي الملائكة في ظلل من الغمام أما الله فيأتي فيما شاء. He said that في ظلل, it applies to the malaika, that the malaika are coming in the clouds, and it doesn't mean that it is coming for Allah. So the attachment, the ta'alluq of this jar wa majrur in the Arabic language, this is called al-jar wa majrur. It has to have a ta'alluq, it has to have a connection to a verb. And here Abu al-Ali is saying that it means that the angels are coming in, al-dhulal min al-ghamam, not that Allah is coming in. But as we already mentioned, what's most apparent is that the meaning here is al-musahaba, that Allah is coming with it, not coming in it, because of course nothing contains Allah. Yes?
I was wondering, you said every Muslim sees it, is that talking about every single group or just like Muslims in general?
The Muslims will see Allah on the Day of Judgment, and they will see Him in Jannah. And as for the disbelievers, then they will not be given the blessing of ru'ya ila Allah Azza Jal. We'll speak about it inshallah in a later chapter. After that, the next ayah says, هل ينظرون إلا أن تأتيهم الملائكة أو يأتي ربك أو يأتي بعض آيات ربك. Do they wait for anything except that Allah Azza Jal, except that the angels come to them, or that their Lord comes to them, or your Lord comes to them, or that some of the signs of your Lord come to them? Now, how the Mufassirin have explained this, it means, do they wait, these disbelievers who are continuing to transgress and not taking heed, what are they waiting for? Are they waiting for the angels to come to them? And the meaning here is the angels of death, in the maut, that the angels come to them during their death, or أن يأتي ربك, or that your Lord comes to them on the Day of Judgment, لفصل القضاء, as we mentioned just now in the previous ayah, أو يأتي بعض آيات ربك, or that some of the signs of your Lord come. And what's intended by this is what has been explained in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he said, لا تقوم الساعة حتى تطلع الشمس من مغربها ورآه الناس فآمنوا جميعا وذلك حين لا ينفع نفسا إيمانها لم تكن آمنت من قبل. The Prophet ﷺ explains this hadith to say that the Day of Judgment will not start and the hour will not come until the sun rises from the west, and everyone will see it and they will all believe, and that will be when the iman will not benefit them, as the completion of the end of the ayah says, يوم يأتي بعض آيات ربك لا ينفع نفسا إيمانها لم تكن آمنت من قبل أو كسبت في إيمانها خيرا. So this ayah, what it also shows us is that when we say that Allah comes on the Day of Judgment, this is an action of Allah and it is a fi'l of His, because al-'atf يقتضي المغايرة, as it says as the principle in the Arabic language shows, that for there to be atf, meaning to mention one after the other, to say this and this and this, that means they are all different things. So the ityan, the coming, has been mentioned for the angels, and it has also been mentioned for Allah, and it's also been mentioned for the signs of Allah. So this shows that you cannot claim later then, you cannot then claim that where it has been mentioned that Allah comes like وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَكُ صَفًّا صَفًّا, your Lord comes and the angels come in lines. You cannot claim that what's intended is وَجَاءَ أَمْرُ رَبِّكَ, that your Lord's command comes, because this ayah clearly shows that there has been differentiation made between the coming of Allah on the Day of Judgment لِفَصْلِ الْقَضَاء and the coming of His signs and His commands. Then it says كَلَّا إِذَا دُكَّتِ الْأَرْضُ دَكًّا دَكًّا وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَكُ صَفًّا صَفًّا. And nay, this is this harf is لِرَدْع وَالزَّجْر, to admonish a person. كلا إذا دكت الأرض دكا دكا, when the earth has been shaken and made to crumble. يعني إذا زلزلت الأرض حتى انهدمت المباني وما عليها. That's the meaning, when the earth is shaken and made flattened. دكا دكا, as is mentioned by the Mufassirin, means دكا بعد دك. يعني it's shaken one after the other and continues like that on the Day of Judgment until everything has been made flat. There won't be any mountains or anything on the Day of Judgment, rather everything will be made as a flat land. وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَكُ صَفًّا صَفًّا, and your Lord comes and the angels صَفًّا صَفًّا. And it says and the angel, but alif and lam here is al-istighraq, as is mentioned in the Arabic language. It means all of the angels. And the angels come line in lines. The next ayah, so all of these ayat are affirming the maji of Allah the Ityan, and maji, the coming of Allah on the Day of Judgment. And it says وَيَوْمَ تَشَقَّقُ السَّمَاءُ بِالْغَمَامِ وَنُزِّلَ الْمَلَائِكَةُ تَنزِيلًا. Now this ayah isn't like the previous ones because it doesn't show that Allah is the one who's coming. Rather it says وَيَوْمَ تَشَقَّقُ السَّمَاءُ بِالْغَمَامِ, and the day when the sky rips open by al-ghamam, the white clouds. And there's two aqwal of the Mufassirin. What does it mean that they rip open by the clouds? Some say bil-ghamam, يعني بتأثير الغمام, that the actual clouds cause the ripping of the sky. And some say يعني عن الغمام. Bil-ghamam means عن الغمام, meaning the sky rips open to show behind it the clouds. The clouds come through the openings in the sky. وَنُزِّلَ الْمَلَائِكَةُ تَنزِيلًا, and the angels are sent down a sending. And this shows that the one who is sending them down is of course Allah Azza Jal. And this is also, all of these ayat also affirm the ulu of Allah Azza Jal, His aboveness. Because if Allah Azza Jal is sending down the angels, then that means Allah is above. And we will speak about nuzul in more detail later. Now an important point to make is not every ayah which mentions ityanullah, the coming of Allah, necessarily means the action of Allah Azza Jal, which is being mentioned in these ayat. Rather, every ayah must be understood in its context. So for example it says فَأَتَى اللَّهُ بُنْيَانَهُمْ مِنَ الْقَوَاعِدِ فَخَرَّ عَلَيْهِمُ السَّقْفُ مِنْ فَوْقِهِمْ وَأَتَاهُمُ الْعَذَابُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. And also says in the Quran فَأَتَاهُمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَمْ يَحْتَسِبُوا, and so on. And also says وَلَقَدْ جِئْنَاهُمْ بِكِتَابٍ فَصَّلْنَاهُ عَلَى عِلْمٍ. So here al-ityan, it doesn't mean coming in the sense of an action of Allah Jal. Rather it means like this ayah says فَأَتَاهُمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَمْ يَحْتَسِبُوا. So Allah Jal came to them from where they didn't expect. Now obviously what's shown in the context of the ayah, it is meaning that Allah Jal يعني دهاهم, Allah Jal, He caught them when they were being heedless, and Allah Jal sent His punishment on them. And this doesn't negate the affirmation of the sifat of ityan and maji in other places, because every ayah is understood based on its context. And for example, as you mentioned in Sifah of Yadayn soon, like when we say Allah Jal, it says in the Quran تَبَارَكَ الَّذِي بِيَدِهِ الْمُلْكُ وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. Glory be to the one who in his hand is the dominion. Now of course the meaning of the ayah based on the context is showing that Allah Jal, He is قادر على كل شيء والمتصرف في الأمور, that Allah Jal, He is the one who controls all things and He has dominion over all things. So the ayah isn't speaking about the meaning of the ayah isn't to affirm the attribute of al-yadayn, of hands, but that doesn't mean that it's negating it either. So there's a difference between what are ayatul sifat, ayat which have came with the purpose of mentioning a specific attribute of Allah Jal, and those ayat which might be, for example, al-kinaya. Al-kinaya in the Arabic language, it is to mention something, not the purpose of its mentioning isn't the actual wording itself, but rather a meaning beyond that. Like it says in, for example, وَمَا بِهِ لَازِمُ مَعْنًا وما به لازم معنى وهو لا ممتنعا كناية فاقسم إلى إرادة النسبة أو نفس الصفة وغير هذين اجتهد أن تعرفه. That it's what the lazimul ma'na, what the meaning necessitates is intended. So in this ayah, when we say that Allah Jal بيده الملك, in His hand is all dominion, this is kinaya عن قدرته وتصرفه. It is showing what this necessitates is that Allah Jal is in control of all matters. But when it's kinaya, what does that mean is that the intention of the ayah is to affirm it's lazim, it's what it necessitates, but it's not saying that the literal meaning is impossible. The literal meaning is not impossible. That's what kinaya is. وَهُوَ لَا مُمْتَنِعًا. It's not something which is impossible. So when we say that, for example, تَبَارَكَ الَّذِي بِيَدِهِ الْمُلْكُ, that this is saying that Allah has control over all things. Or we say فَأَتَى اللَّهُ بُنْيَانَهُ مِنَ الْقَوَاعِدِ, that Allah comes to the buildings from its basis and wrecks them. This is not saying that Allah doesn't have the attribute of ityan, coming, and He doesn't have the attribute of al-yadayn, of hands. Rather, those are already affirmed in other texts. And this isn't the ta'wil which is prohibited. The ta'wil which we say, the misinterpretation or reinterpretation which is forbidden in the Sharia, it is to صرف اللفظ عن ظاهره بغير دليل. It is to push the text away from its apparent meaning without an evidence. As for here, these are the apparent meanings, because the apparent meaning is based on its context. And the apparent meaning isn't just what the word means in the dictionary. And that's why, for example, in the Arabic language, you have words can have different dalalat, meanings. So there's the, for example, haqiqa lughawiyya, the linguistic meaning. And then there's the haqiqa urfiyya, the cultural meaning. A common example is, for example, ad-dabba. In the Arabic language, ad-dabba means anything which ma yadubu ala al-ard, anything which walks on the earth. That's the linguistic meaning. But the urfi meaning, the meaning in terms of customs, is something which is four-legged. So a human wouldn't be called a dabba in a urfi sense, in a customary sense, even though linguistically you can call it a dabba. So if there was somewhere, if a text was to mention dabba, and it doesn't mean humans, we would say this is ta'wil, this is misinterpretation. No. This is the apparent meaning, the zahir, based on its haqiqa, urfiyah, based on its customary meaning. And likewise, the haqiqa shar'iyah, as-salah, in the linguistic sense, it means dua, to make dua. And in the shar'i sense, in the legislative Islamic sense, it means the prayer which we all know, which begins with takbir and ends with taslim. So if a text mentions salah in that sense, this isn't ta'wil, rather this is affirming the text on its apparent meaning based on the context. Okay. Next, إثبات وجه الله سبحانه. We will now mention the ayat which affirm that Allah has a wajh, a face. So it says, وَقَوْلُهُ وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. The ayat before it is كُلُّ مَنْ عَلَيْهَا فَانٍ وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. Everything which is on it, which is on the earth, will be fanin, will be destroyed or pass away or not remain. وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ, and the face of your Lord remains ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ, that which has great jalal, meaning al-jalal is azama, greatness, and al-ikram, and to do goodness and to honor. And this is affirming the attribute of al-wajh, of Allah has a face in a way which is befitting of Him, not like that of the creation. And we cannot imagine how that is, but its meaning is understood as an attribute of Allah in a way which is befitting of Him. And then we affirm what the Sharia has affirmed, such as an-nadhar ila wajhi Allah, looking at, seeing the face of Allah, as will be mentioned in other texts. Yes. Which first? Yeah. كُلُّ مَنْ عَلَيْهَا فَانٍ, everything which is on it, meaning on the earth, will be fan, will die, will not remain. وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ, and the face of your Lord will remain. ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ, the one who has all al-jalal and ikram, all greatness and honor and honoring. Now, if you look at the tafsir of the Salaf, when they speak about this ayah, they mainly have two opinions: what the meaning of this ayah is, not what the meaning of the sifa of wajh is, but what the meaning of the ayah is, what the meaning the ayah is speaking about. So some say وَيَبْقَى ذَاتُ اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ, or وَيَبْقَى رَبُّكَ, that what it means is that Allah will remain and nothing else is remaining. And we'll speak about the second meaning soon, inshallah. So is this first meaning ta'wil, reinterpreting the ayah? No, it's not. And the reason for that is, this is again kinaya, as we just mentioned. It is affirming what the text necessitates. And it's also called a tafsir bil lazim, to give tafsir, an explanation of the text based on what it necessitates. What this necessitates is, if Allah's face is remaining, Allah's face is His attribute, so then He is remaining. Yes? So, of course, if Allah's face is remaining, that means Allah is remaining, because the face is an attribute of Allah. Now, does that mean that Allah's wujud, His existence, is not different to His face? No. Al-wajh is an attribute of Allah. And how do we know that? We know it from the text which we mentioned here, and also from the hadith of Prophet ﷺ. The hadith that the Prophet said, أعوذ بالله العظيم وبوجهه الكريم, I seek protection with Allah, Al-Azim, the most great, and I seek protection with his face, al-Kareem, the most honored. Now obviously this again, as we mentioned, is al-atf, to mention two things, this and this. And this shows that the two things are not having the exact same meaning, or else there would be no point in saying I seek protection in Allah and I seek protection in Allah. Rather saying I seek protection with Allah and with his al-Wajh al-Kareem. So this is affirming that it's an attribute of Allah. And how do we know it's an attribute, not just a creation? Because the Prophet ﷺ here is seeking protection from Allah and from an attribute of his. And of course seeking protection, al-isti'adha, it is something which is only done from Allah. You only seek protection from Allah and not from the creation. Because seeking protection from other than Allah as well can be disbelief, can be shirk, as we will speak about later inshallah. And also many of the for example the ayah which says لِلَّذِينَ أَحْسَنُوا الْحُسْنَى وَزِيَادَةً, for those who do good is al-husna, yani the greatness, the great reward, and ziyada, and something extra, something more. And all of the Sahaba all gave tafsir of this ayah to mean النَّظَرِ إِلَى وَجْهِ اللَّهِ, to see the face of Allah Jal in Jannah. And many other texts which affirm that Allah Jal has an attribute which is al-wajh, in a way which is befitting of him, not like that of the creation. It says كُلُّ شَيْءٍ هَالِكٌ إِلَّا وَجْهَهُ, all things are halikun, yani will be destroyed except for his face. Again, this is the same as the previous ayah. The Salaf have two explanations or two tafsir, both of them being tafsir bil lazim, what the text necessitates. The first, as we mentioned, is that كُلُّ شَيْءٍ هَالِكٌ إِلَّا وَجْهَهُ, yani كُلُّ شَيْءٍ هَالِكٌ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, everything is to be destroyed except Allah. He is the one who remains. And the other interpretation is كُلُّ شَيْءٍ هَالِكٌ إِلَّا مَا أُرِيدَ بِهِ وَجْهَ اللَّهِ, everything is to be destroyed except that by which Allah's face is sought. And I think this is narrated from Sufyan al-Thawri and other than him, meaning that all other actions and all other things which a person does, it's all haban manthura, it's all useless and halik. It doesn't yani count for anything except for what you do seeking the wajh of Allah, seeking the face of Allah through the action, your good deeds. That's what remains for you, and everything else is yani fan, it is not remaining. And this is again tafsir, or this, even if we were to say that this is a form of ta'wil, it's not the ta'wil which is haram, because the ta'wil which is said is haram is to do ta'wil without an evidence. As for interpreting a text in a specific way due to what other texts necessitate, what other texts in the Quran and Sunnah have affirmed to combine, to yani bring together the meanings, then this is permissible. So those who said from the Salaf that the meaning is كُلُّ شَيْءٍ هَالِكٌ إِلَّا وَجْهَهُ, everything is to be destroyed except مَا أُرِيدَ بِهِ وَجْهَ اللَّهِ, what is done for the sake of seeking the pleasure of Allah, seeking the wajh of Allah, then firstly this tafsir does not negate the sifa of wajh Allah, rather it affirms it, because what by which the face of Allah is sought, this is affirming that Allah has a face, a wajh. And the second point is that they interpreted it in this way, or some of the Salaf interpreted it in this way, because of the other texts which show that yani there are things which remain from the creation. Of course, yani Jannah remains, and hellfire remains, and al-arsh remains, and the arwah, the souls remain. These things remain and they're not destroyed. So then they interpreted what's to be intended, yani kullu shay, everything. They meant everything as in every action. This is al-'am alladhi yurad bihi al-khusus. In usul fiqh this is called the general wording which has a specific meaning. So those Salaf interpreted the text to mean kullu shayin halik, everything is to be destroyed, yani every amal, kullu amalin halik, every action is to be destroyed except that which Allah's face is sought with. And this meaning is a correct meaning. Yes.
Which scholar had this opinion?
I believe it was a Sufyan al-Thawri, but I can't recall. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was. It's narrated from some of the Sahaba and from some of the Tabi'in. The next ayat which we'll speak about now is إثبات اليدين لله عز وجل, affirming that Allah Azza has two hands, and this is shown from his qawl, from Allah Azza's saying, where he said وَقَوْلُهُ مَا مَنَعَكَ أَن تَسْجُدَ لِمَا خَلَقْتُ بِيَدَيَّ, what prevented you? So this is Allah Azza speaking to Iblis, to Shaitan. He said to him, what prohibited you, what stopped you from doing prostration to what I created with my hands, with my two hands. Yadayya, yani yadayn, and then the second ya is for al-mutakallim, my two hands. So of course Allah commanded all the angels, فَسَجَدَ الْمَلَائِكَةُ كُلُّ مَجْمَعُونَ إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ أَبَى وَاسْتَكْبَرَ. Allah commanded the angels to all do prostration to Adam alayhi salam, and they all did except Iblis. He did not prostrate and he refused. So Allah said to him, what is that which prevents you from doing sajda to what I created? Biyadayya, with my two hands. And there's a hadith that Prophet ﷺ said, خَلَقَ اللَّهُ بِيَدَيْهِ ثَلَاثًا, that Allah created three things with his hands. And those three things, the hadith mentions خَلَقَ آدَمَ بِيَدَيْهِ وَغَرَسَ جَنَّاتِ عَدْنٍ بِيَدَيْهِ وَكَتَبَ التَّوْرَةَ بِيَدَيْهِ أو بِيَدِهِ. That Allah, He created Adam with his two hands, and he planted Jannah, the tree in garden, the garden in Jannah, Jannati Adn, with his hand, and he wrote the Torah with his hand. Now obviously the Torah is the speech of Allah, and the speech of Allah is غير مخلوق, not created. But what's intended here is that what was written, yani the text, letters, and however it was written, yani for example in the Lawh al-Mahfuz, that is what's written, not the actual speech, because the speech of Allah is uncreated, as we will speak about when we come to Kalam Allah, when we speak about the Quran. So this is affirming a maziyya, something which is specific and something which is a praise of Adam alayhi salam, that he is a creation which Allah created with his two hands. And this shows that what's intended by Yadayillah, by the attributes, by the two hands of Allah, are attributes of Allah and not something else. Yani it's not correct to say that what Yadayn means, as some groups say, who do ta'wil like the Mu'tazila and Sha'ar, they say it means bi qudratillah, by the strength of Allah, or they say bi ni'matillah, by the blessing of Allah. And this is an interpretation which is incorrect for many reasons. One of the reasons is that the ayah specifically says Yadayn, two hands. And the ulama of Lugha, such as Abu Ali al-Farisi and others, have mentioned that at-tathniya nassun fil adad. At-tathniyatu nassun fil adad. That when you come in the dual form, when a word comes in the dual form in the Arabic language, this only has one possible meaning, meaning that there's two things. It cannot be more than two, it cannot be less than two. As opposed to when the word is in the jam', in the plural form, it can sometimes be in the plural form, but you mean two. You can even mean one. As it says in the Quran, فَقَدْ صَغَتْ قُلُوبُكُمَا, your two hearts have yani listened and obeyed. And it's obvious talking about Aisha radiallahu anha and Hafsa radiallahu anha, two hearts, but it says قُلُوبُكُمَا, your hearts, in the plural sense. But it was used, the plural was used, and two was intended. And sometimes a singular word in the singular form can be used, and the plural is intended as well. Like we said, وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَكُ, al-malak is in the singular form, but plural is intended. So when it's singular, when the word is in singular form or plural form, it can mean a different number. Singular form can mean plural, and plural can mean singular or dual. But as for when the word is in the dual form, in tathniya, then this can only mean two. It cannot mean three, it cannot mean one. So, and it cannot mean more than that. So when Allah says, مَا مَنَعَكَ أَن تَسْجُدَ لِمَا خَلَقْتُ بِيَدَيْ, what prevented you from doing sajda, prostrating to what I created with my two hands? This cannot mean more than two, and it cannot mean less than two. So then that cannot be the qudra of Allah, the power of Allah, because Allah's qudra is not limited to just two things. Allah's qudra, His ability, is all encompassing. And likewise Allah's ni'mah, His blessings, is plentiful. Cannot be وَإِن تَعُودُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. And if you count the blessings of Allah, you cannot yani encompass them. So this must mean that it's not neither that nor that. So then it must be an attribute of Allah. Likewise, if the meaning was qudra or ni'mah, blessing or power or any other interpretation, then the ayah wouldn't have any point, because Allah is saying to Iblis that you must do prostration to Adam as I commanded you, because Adam is a blessed creation, a creation which I have created with my own hands. That makes Adam يعني له مزية على غيره, له فضل, he has a virtue over the other creation. If the meaning was qudra, power, or ni'mah, blessings, then Iblis could say to Allah Azza Jal, but you created me with your yadayn as well, with your hands as well. If hands meant quwwah, Allah Azza Jal created Iblis with his hands as well then. But He created certain things with His hands, with an attribute of His. And again, like we mentioned, all of the other attributes of Allah, it's in a way which is befitting of Him, not one which we can imagine or picture or understand its howness or its haqiqah, its reality. And says, وَقَالَتِ الْيَهُودُ يَدُ اللَّهِ مَغْلُولَةٌ غُلَّتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَلُعِنُوا بِمَا قَالُوا بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبْسُوطَتَانِ يُنْفِقُ كَيْفَ يَشَاءُ. And the Yahud said, the Jews said, Yadullahi maghlula, the hand of Allah is tied. This is kinaya anil bukhl. It means that they are claiming that Allah is stingy. Ta'ala Allahu amma yaquluna uluwan kabira. So some of the Jews said that Allah is stingy. Then it says, غُلَّتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَلُعِنُوا بِمَا قَالُوا. Rather, their hands are tied and they are cursed by what they said. بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبْسُوطَتَانِ. Rather, Allah's hands are spread open. يُنْفِقُ كَيْفَ يَشَاءُ. He gives as how He wills. And this is again affirming yadan, that Allah has two hands in a way befitting of Him. And it's also affirming that Allah, He does actions with His hands. So we already learned from the previous ayah that Allah creates with His hand. And from this ayah, another ayat, we also learn that Allah does al-qabd wal-bast, that Allah spreads and grabs, holds. It says, وَالسَّمَاوَاتُ مَطْوِيَّاتٌ بِيَمِينِهِ. It says in the other ayah, that the heavens are wrapped and held in the hand of Allah. And the first of the ayah, the beginning of the ayah says, what's the beginning of the ayah? وَالسَّمَاوَاتُ مَطْوِيَّاتٌ بِيَمِينِهِ قبضته يوم القيامة. The beginning of ayah Nusaytu, Allah understand, past, slipped out of my head. But when it says that the earth is قبضته يوم القيامة, Allah grabs the earth with His hand on the Day of Judgment, and He wraps the heavens in His hand. So this is affirming that these are actions which Allah does through His attribute of al-yadayn. Yes, you have a question? Huh? وما قدر الله حق قدره والأرض جميعا قبضته يوم القيامة والسماوات مطويات بيمينه. Then they have not glorified Allah, a true glorification. والأرض جميعا, and the earth as a whole is قبضته يوم القيامة, is grabbed by Allah. والسماوات مطويات, and the heavens are folded in His yameen, in His hand. Okay. Then the next ayat will speak about إثبات العينين لله, affirming that Allah has two eyes. It says, وقوله, Allah said, وَاصْبِرْ لِحُكْمِ رَبِّكَ فَإِنَّكَ بِأَعْيُنِنَا. And have patience for the command of Allah, or the command of your Lord, فَإِنَّكَ بِأَعْيُنِنَا, because you are بِأَعْيُنِنَا, in our sight. Well, that's how you would translate it in English. It's not the literal word for word translation, but we will speak about that now, inshallah. It means that you are under our supervision, under our sight, al-kala'ah. And this is again tafsir bil lazim, what the text necessitates. But rather, what the exact wording says, فَإِنَّكَ بِأَعْيُنِنَا, our eyes. Meaning you are under our eyes. As in that Allah, He is raqib, He is all seeing, and He is looking and watchful of His creation. And it also says, وَحَمَلْنَاهُ عَلَى ذَاتِ الْوَاحِ وَدُسُرٍ تَجْرِي بِأَعْيُنِنَا جَزَاءً لِمَنْ كَانَ كُفِرٍ. And we carried him على ذات الواح ودسر, in a ship which is ذات الواح, which is made of alwah, meaning planks, ودسر, and nails. They speak about Nuh alayhi salam when they were carried in the safina, in the boat. And so this ayah is saying then تجري بأعيننا, that it goes and travels under our sight, under our eyes, in the literal word for word meaning. The way it means that Allah is watchful of and protecting Nuh alayhi salam. جزاء لمن كان كفر, and that's the reward for the one who was disbelieved in Nuh alayhi salam. The people disbelieved in him, so Allah just saved Nuh alayhi salam and the believers, and He destroyed the disbelievers. And again, وَأَلْقَيْتُ عَلَيْكَ مَحَبَّةً مِّنِّي وَلِتُصْنَعَ عَلَى عَيْنِي. And this is about Musa alayhi salam and his story. And we sent on you love, mahabba from, and I sent on you mahabba, love from me, وَلِتُصْنَعَ عَلَى عَيْنِي, and for you to grow and be made under, ala aini, again, under Allah's supervision, under His kala'a and His muraqabah. And all of these sifat are affirming the attribute of al-aynayn, that Allah has two eyes. Yes. Oh, this last one. وَأَلْقَيْتُ عَلَيْكَ مَحَبَّةً مِّنِّي, and I sent down upon you mahabba, love from me, وَلِتُصْنَعَ عَلَى عَيْنِي, and so that you grow and are made under our sight. Now again, translating these ayat word for word doesn't really work exactly in English, because some of these are asalib al-Arab, specific ways, specific sorts of phrases which the Arabs would use, which aren't necessarily compatible or exactly the same as how you would say it in English. But all of these are affirming that Allah has the sifa of ayn, has eyes. Now a person might ask, you said that it is ithbatul aynayn, affirming two eyes for Allah. They might say two things. First, these ayat, the way you explain them to mean muraqabah and kala'ah, that Allah watches over you and He is supervising you and protecting you. So how does that then affirm the attribute of aynayn? And they might say, why did you say two and not three or one? Because the words here, it's used in وَلِتُسْنَا عَلَى عَيْنِي singular form and بِأَعْيُنِنَا plural form. So where's the dual? So as for the first question, which is, for example, Ibn Abbas, when he came to some of these ayat, تَجْرِي بِأَعْيُنَ أَجْزَاءَ لِمَنْ كَانَ كُفِرٍ, he explained it to mean بِكَلَاءَتِنَا, under our supervision. So does this mean that this is ta'wil, reinterpreting it and negating the attribute of al-aynayn? No, this is again kinaya, which is explaining the lazim of the meaning, what the text entails and necessitates, but it doesn't mean that it's negating the attribute of aynayn, of eyes from Allah. And for example, with Imam Sa'id al-Darimi, in his book where he refutes special al-Mirisi, one of the Mu'tazila, al-Mirisi tried bringing this argument that look, Ibn Abbas said that bi'ayunina means bikala'atina, under our supervision. And Imam Sa'id refuted him and said that according to the Arabs, that al-kali, the one who is watchful, you only say that for one who has an eye, who has the attributes of eyes. Otherwise, you cannot use this word to mean that thing. So when Ibn Abbas is saying that this is the meaning of bikala'atina, that is within itself affirming the attribute of al-ayn, of eyes for Allah. And so this is tafsir bil lazim, explaining what the text necessitates based on the words mentioned, not necessarily what the exact word means. And as for the second question, why are we saying two aynayn, two eyes? Well, firstly, this is the ijma' of the Salaf. This is something which all of the Salaf agreed on, that we affirm for Allah two eyes. And this is mentioned by many scholars. So Uthman bin Sa'id al-Darimi mentions this, and so does Ibn Khuzaymah, so does Abu Amr al-Dani, and so does Abu Bakr al-Baqillani, and so does Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari himself in Maqalat al-Islamiyyin. He says that Ahlul Hadith, they affirm for Allah yuthbitun lillahi aynayn. And all of these scholars, they all narrated the ijma' of the Salaf in affirming al-aynayn, two eyes for Allah. So that's the first reason. And then if the Salaf said it, then we affirm as they said, because they are more comprehending and stronger in their knowledge and closer to ikhlas and sincerity than we are. So we take their understanding. And the second is that firstly, using the plural, the singular form, doesn't negate duality. As we mentioned just now, that at-tathniya nasun fil adad, to say two eyes, aynayn, that is meaning it can only be two, it can't be more or less. But as for singular form and plural form, it's not specifying the number. It can mean other numbers. As we mentioned, فَقَدْ صَغَتْ قُلُوبُكُمَا إِن تَتُوبَا إِلَى اللَّهِ فَقَدْ صَغَتْ قُلُوبُكُمَا. If you make tawbah to Allah, then your hearts will have submitted to Allah. And it says قُلُوبُكُمَا in the plural form, but what's intended is qalbayn, two hearts. Also, there's khilaf between the ulama of the Arabic language, the scholars of the Arabic language, what is the least plural. When you use the plural, like for example qulub or a'yun in the plural form, does that mean three or more? Does it mean two or more? Some of the ulama said it means two or more. And also, as for example, litusna ala aini, this in the Arabic language, it is min siyaghul umum. It is when you have mudaf ila ma'rifah, when a word is attached to a known word, a definite word. This gives the meaning of umum, encompassing all of it. So it doesn't mean just one eye. So this is from the linguistic sense. And also from the evidences that the Prophet ﷺ said, إن الدجال إن المسيح الدجال أعور وليس ربكم بأعور. The hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that the Dajjal, who will claim to be the false Messiah and who will claim to be Allah near the Day of Judgment, he is one who is a'war. And Allah is not a'war. What does a'war mean? It means to have two eyes, but one of them is faulty, one of them is defective. It doesn't see and doesn't work. and it's been described as being like the shape of a grape with skin covering it. So the Dajjal only sees with one eye. Now, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that the Dajjal will come and he will claim to be Allah Jal. And one of the signs that he is lying is that he claims to be Allah, but he is a'war. He has a defect in one of his eyes. And Allah Jal, laysa bi'awar, is not a'war. Now, what this shows is that Allah Jal's eyes are free of defection. So when when the Prophet ﷺ negated that Allah Azza Jal is a'war, that is affirming that Allah Jal has two eyes free of imperfection. And this is from the principles in usul fiqh also, is that نفي الخاص يدل على إثبات العام. That when you negate something which is specific, it's as if you're affirming that which is more generic. Like for example, if I said لم يأتي محمد المسجد يوم الخميس, Muhammad didn't come to the masjid on Thursday. What this indicates is that he came on a different day. Or else if he didn't come at all, I would have just said لم يأتي محمد إلى المسجد. Muhammad didn't come to the masjid. So specifying on Thursday means that he comes on other days. So like that, when the Prophet ﷺ said that وَإِنَّ رَبَّكُمْ لَيْسَ بِأَعْوَرٍ, that your Lord is not a'war, doesn't have a defect in one of his eyes, then that is affirming that Allah has two eyes free of defect. If Allah didn't have two eyes, he would have said وَلَيْسَ لِرَبِّكَ عَيْنٍ, your Lord does not have an eye. Or he would have said وَلِرَبِّكَ أَكْثَرْ مِنْ عَيْنَيْن. But the Prophet ﷺ did say that. Rather, he specifically negated al-awar, having a defect in one of your two eyes, to affirm that Allah has two eyes free of defect. And this istidlal, this evidence was mentioned by many of the ulama, as I mentioned, Ad-Darimi and Al-Baqillani and Abu Amr Ad-Dani and other than them. They all did istidlal, using this evidence to show that Allah has aynayn. Now, the next section, it speaks about إثبات السمع والبصر لله سبحانه, affirming hearing and seeing for Allah Jal. And we already spoke about this in some detail, but we will speak about it again. It says, وقوله, Allah Jal said, قد سمع الله قول التي تجادلك في زوجها وتشتكي إلى الله والله يسمع تحاوركما إن الله سميع بصير. Indeed, Allah Jal has heard the saying of the woman who تجادلك في زوجها, who argues with you about her زوجها, her husband. وتشتكي إلى الله, and she complains to Allah Jal about how her husband the dhihar of her, how he forbade her upon himself. It's something which is a fiqhi masala. Wallahu yasma'u tahawurakama, and Allah hears your conversation. Inna Allah sami'un basir. Indeed, Allah is all hearing and all seeing and all hearing. This is again affirming for Allah Jal that He has as-sam' wal basar, that He hears and He sees. And so now we know that there's a difference between the attributes of, for example, al-ayn and al-basar. The attribute of Allah having an eye and Allah seeing. These two attributes, they are distinct, but they have ta'alluq. There's a connection between them. Allah Jal yubsiru bi'aynihi. Allah sees by His eye. Not that His eye is His seeing. Rather, these are two distinct attributes of Allah Jal. And one of them is a sifa, which is dhatiyah, which is describing the essence of Allah, that Allah Jal is described with having an ayn, and the other is a fi'l, is an action of Allah Jal, that He sees. It's a sifa dhatiyya fi'liyya, that Allah Jal He sees, but His seeing is an action of His. Yes.
It says here, it's affirming that Allah's hearing and seeing does not necessitate that Allah is.
No. As for affirming eyes for Allah Jal, we affirm that because the texts have mentioned it. But as for affirming hearing, then there's no text which affirms it, and there's no reason to affirm it. Because the asal of the methodology of Ahlul Sunnah, the way that Ahlul Sunnah understand the texts relating to Allah is that we do a tawqif. That these texts are tawqifiyah. So we do tawaqquf. We stop where the text is stopped. The text affirmed for Allah aynayn, two eyes, so we affirm for Him two eyes. As for al-udhun, there's no text which has no ayah, no any hadith which affirms that Allah has the attribute of is, so we not affirm it, especially since these sort of attributes are sifat khabariyah. The attributes of Allah can be categorized into sifat aqliyah and sifat khabariyah. Sifat aqliyah meaning intellectual attributes, attributes which are understood through al-aql, through intellect. Meaning even if Allah hadn't told us that He is alim, all knowing, we would already know that Allah is alim, because we see that Allah created everything and His creation indicates wisdom, and wisdom indicates knowledge. Likewise, if Allah hadn't told us that He is Al-Qadir, all able, we would already know that Allah is all capable, because His creation indicates Al-Qudra. You cannot create without ability. So those sifat are Aqliyah, meaning even if the text doesn't mention it, we already know it through the text, through intellect. But some sifat for Allah are Khabariyah, meaning the only way we know of these attributes of Allah is that He has told us, He has informed us in the Quran or the Sunnah. So the sifat of Ayn is min sifat al-Khabariyah. It's been mentioned in the text. Otherwise we would not have known that Allah has al-Aynayn. As for something like al-Udhun, an ear, this has not been mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah, therefore we do not affirm it for Allah, nor do we negate it. Because in order to negate it, we would need an evidence, and there's no evidence neither for affirming nor negating. Or make something which is, which they do not like, reach them, whilst they don't know. Allah has written for this person to, for example, be punished, or for them to be killed against the Muslims in Ghazwat al-Badr or Uhud or other than that, and they didn't even know that, they didn't expect it. As for al-Kayd, it can be with their knowledge or without their knowledge. The next section mentions the attributes وصف الله بالعفو والمغفرة والرحمة والعزة والقدرة. Yes.
Sorry, can you repeat the last two tafsirs?
إنهم يكيدون كيدا. Indeed they plan a planning. وأكيد كيدا. And I plan a planning. And the next section mentions the attributes of al-afu and maghfirah, Allah's forgiveness and His pardoning, and His rahmah, His mercy, and His izzah, His grandness, and His qudra, and His ability. So it says وقوله, Allah says إن تبدوا خيرا لا تخفوه وتعفوا عن سوء فإن الله كان عفوا قديرا. إن تبدوا خيرا, if you manifest good, if you make good appear, أو تخفوه, or if you hide good, أو تعفوا عن سوء, or you forgive or you pardon something which was harm or something which is bad, فإن الله كان عفوا قديرا, then for indeed Allah was afu, most pardoning, and qadir, most able. Well, this ayah is saying that it's encouraging a person to do good and to pardon those who harm them, because Allah is saying that if you do that, then remember that Allah was afu qadir, just as how Allah is qadir, He is capable of punishing you and holding you accountable. At the same time, He is afu, He forgives and pardons. So ألا تحبون أن يغفر الله لكم, it says in the Quran, do you not love for Allah to forgive for you, forgive your sins? So if someone does harm to you or someone doesn't treat you how you deserve, you should pardon them for the sake of Allah, so that you remember that Allah is afu qadir. How much has Allah pardoned us for our sins and not held us accountable when we were deserving of punishment? So for you to do something which is much less, on a much smaller scale, then that is ahra bik, that's more suitable for you. And it says وَلْيَعْفُوا وَلْيَصْفَحُوا أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ, and let the believers يعفو, pardon, and يصفحوا, and to turn their cheek, to forgive. أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ, do you not love for Allah to forgive for you, to forgive your sins. وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ, and Allah is most forgiving and most merciful. Now so these are affirming attributes for Allah, affirming the attribute of al-afwa and al-maghfirah, forgiveness and pardoning. So al-maghfirah, it is to forgive. Allah forgives your sins. As for afu, it is to pardon. And the difference, there's different opinions of the ulama. What's the difference between Allah's afu, His pardoning, and His maghfirah, His forgiveness, and which one is greater? Some of the ulama say that al-afu means, or al-maghfirah means that Allah doesn't hold you accountable for your sin, that He doesn't hold you accountable for your sin. That's maghfirah, Allah forgives you. As for al-afu, then that's something which is even more, which is not only that Allah doesn't hold you accountable, but He also wipes it off your slate. That it's al-mahu, that it is for it to be wiped off your book of deeds. So some say that al-afu is greater than al-maghfirah, and the other ulama have different opinions. And this ayah is also affirming for Allah that attribute of ar-rahmah, that He is most merciful, and we already spoke about that before. And it's also affirming al-qudra, that Allah is all able, and we already spoke about that as well.
Can you repeat the title?
وصف الله بالعفو والمغفرة والرحمة والعزة والقدرة, describing Allah, or affirming for Allah the descriptions of al-af, pardoning, and al-maghfirah, forgiveness, wal-rahmah, and mercy, wal-izzah, greatness or highness, and al-qudra, and ability, that Allah is all capable, able to do all things. This is what قوله, Allah also said, وَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ وَلِرَسُولِهِ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and al-izzah is for Allah. And this pattern here, or this ordering, لِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ, this is there's taqdeem in it, something which came before it. What it's saying is, for Allah is al-izzah, the greatness. And this is showing that it's specific, it's mahsur. التقديم يدل على الحصر in the Arabic language. When one word comes before its normal position, then that shows that the ruling is specific to it. So meaning that al-izzah is only for Allah and only for His Rasul, His Prophet, and for the believers. There's no izzah, there's no greatness or glory for other than them, for the disbelievers and for the munafiqeen. And this affirming izzatullah, Allah's greatness, and His izzah is بذاته and بقدرته وبصفاته. Allah Jal, He's most great in His that, in His essence, that Allah Jal is much greater than everything else. Everything else compared to Allah is nothing. And also in His sifat and His attributes, all of Allah's attributes have greatness beyond any greatness in the attributes of the creation. Allah Jal has complete perfection. And also in His qudra, in His ability, that Allah is aziz, لا ينال جنبه, that someone cannot harm Allah or try to overpower Allah. Rather, Allah is aziz, beyond them, and He is all able, all capable. And it also says وَقَوْلُهُ عَنْ إِبْلِيسَ, and Iblis, and Allah mentioned that Iblis mentioned قَالَ فَبِعِزَّتِكَ لَأُغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. Iblis said, قال, he said, فَبِعِزَّتِكَ, then by your greatness, I swear by your greatness, لَأُغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ, I will misguide them all, Bani Adam, the children of Adam, إلا, as the next ayah says, لأغوينهم أجمعين إلا من قال فبعزتك لأغوينهم أجمعين إلا قال فبعزتك لأغوينهم أجمعين إلا عبادك منهم المخلصين, except for your slaves, those who you have chosen and you have made them protected from misguidance. And this is again this is also showing that it's permissible to swear by Allah and swear by His attributes, that a person can swear by the attributes of Allah. You say, for example, وَعِزَّةُ اللَّهِ, I swear by the greatness of Allah. Or you say, وَعِلْمِ اللَّهِ, I swear by the knowledge of Allah, and so on. Because swearing by al-makhluk, swearing by the creation, taking an oath by the creation, is impermissible. And let's take one more section, inshallah, then we'll stop. It says, the next section says, إثبات الاسم لله ونفي المثل عنه, affirming the name for Allah Jal and negating from Him al-mithl, one who is like Him. So it says, وقوله, and Allah Jal said, تبارك اسم ربك ذي الجلال والإكرام, and تبارك Allah, blessed is Allah and great is Allah, glorified is He, glorified is the name of your Lord. Ismu Rabbika, the name of your Lord. Dhil Jalali, the one who has greatness, wal ikram, and honor and honoring. And this is affirming that Allah has a name, that He has names, and that His names are blessed. It says also in the Quran, وَاللَّهِ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى فَادْعُوهُ بِهَا, Allah has great names, so call Him with those names. And some groups rejected that Allah have names. The Ali Jahmiyyah, Jahm ibn Safwan, Ja'd ibn Dirham, and so on, they didn't affirm for Allah's names because they said that this is likening Him to the creation. And again, this is refuted by the Quran. Tabarak ismu rabbik, glory be to the name of your Lord. The next ayah says, وَقَوْلُهُ فَاعْبُدْهُ وَاصْطَبِرْ لِعِبَادَتِهِ هَلْ تَعْلَمُ لَهُ سَمِيًّا. So worship Him, and you worship Allah, وَاصْطَبِرْ لِعِبَادَتِهِ, and have great patience in His worship. Istabara, it is مبالغة في الصبر. It is to be beyond just normal patience. It's to have great patience in His worship. And the sabr, having patience, it is of three types. It is a sabr ala ta'atillah, to have patience in worshipping Allah, in being obedient to Allah, and a sabr an ma'asiyatillah, and to be patient in leaving off the sins which Allah has forbidden, and a sabr ala qada'illahi wa qadarihi, to have patience in what Allah has decreed upon you, min al-masa'ib, if something happens to you, some harm comes to you, that you have patience in that as well. And patience is something which is obligatory on every Muslim. Then it says, هل تعلم له سميا? Do you know for Allah a Sami? And Sami means al-mathil, one who is like him, one who is similar to him, one who is the same as him. And this is in the Arabic language called istifham inkari. It is in the form of question. It's a rhetorical question to show negation. Do you know for Allah a mithl, a nadhir, a Sami, one who is like him? The answer is of course no. There's no one who is like Allah. And this is ayah is indicating that if there's no one like Allah, then He is the only one who is deserving of worship. He is the one who that you need to fa'bud, that you worship, and not other than Him. Yes?
Sami is not a bunch of hearings.
No, that's Sami' with an ayn.
It means some of that.
Yeah, it's from, it's in asl, it's from the word ism. Or ism in asl is from sima, which is from wawsim mim wasm. And do you know anything which is named like Allah, meaning like this, to be the same as Allah? Okay, next it says وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ, and there is no one who is an equal to Allah. Al-kuf means an equal. Al-mukafi, there's no one who is, and for Allah there's no one who is equal to Him. And we already spoke about this ayah in the beginning of the book. The next is وَقَوْلُ, and Allah said فَلَا تَجْعَلُوا لِلَّهِ أَنْدَادًا وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ, and do not make for Allah and that equals وَأَنْتُمْ, and that is the plural of nid. Nid is someone who is on the same level, who is an equal. وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ, whilst you know, meaning do not worship other than Allah and do not equate anyone to Allah out of knowledge. If you do it out of knowledge, then you want to be destroyed. That's the greatest sin, to make أن تجعل الله ندا, that you make someone who is equal to Allah in your tawheed of rububiyyah, in your belief about that person, that you equate him to Allah in Allah's qudra and His ilm and so on, or to equate them to Allah in glorification, al-ta'zeem wal-ibadah, in worship, for you to worship other than Allah. All of that is the shirk which makes a person a disbeliever. فَلَا تَجْعَلُوا اللَّهَ أَنْدَادًا وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. The next ayah says وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَتَّخِذُ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ أَنْدَادًا يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ. And from the people there are those, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ, and from the people there are those, مَن يَتَّخِذُ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ أَنْدَادًا, those who take besides Allah equals. They take partners with Allah. يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ. They love them, they love these andad, these idols and these things which they worship, like how they love Allah. And there's different opinions of this ayah. What does it mean? كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ, meaning how Allah, how they love Allah, or how the Muslims love Allah, or how Allah loves the Muslims. Three opinions. But we'll take the opinion which says that they claim to love Allah and they equate the idols and those they worship and the ibadah and directing worship to them, they will equate them to Allah in their glorification and their hubb, because that's the reality of al-ibadah, of worship. Ibadah goes back to two meanings, al-ta'zeem wal-mahabba, glorification and love. To equate someone to Allah in that you worship them like you do Allah, glorify them the way that you do, that you put them on the level like you put Allah, then that is what shirk is. So this ayah is again negating that Allah have a nid, an equal. And this is also showing that there's talazum, there's a relationship between al-tawheed in tawheed ilmi and tawheed amali. Tawheed in terms of our beliefs, rububiyyah wal asma wa sifat, what we believe about Allah in terms of His lordship and His names and attributes, and between tawheed al-qasd wal talab wal ibadah, worshipping Allah and making Him, singling Him out in uluhiyyah, in ta'zeem, in glorification and worship. Meaning because Allah is Ar-Rabb, the Lord, the one who there's no one like Him, and He's the creator of all things, then He is deserving of being worshipped. And because He is the only one who's like that, that means He's the only one who is deserving of worship. So the relationship between these two, there's Tawheed al-Rububiyyah and Asma wa Sifat, it is indicating uluhiyyah, to specify Allah in worship, bil-lazim, bil-talazum, the alaqa, the relationship between al-Rububiyyah and al-Uluhiyyah is talazum, that this one necessitates the other. And as for al-Uluhiyyah, that it necessitates Rububiyyah by tadammun, it contains within it, because if you're glorifying someone, you're only glorifying them for something which is unique to them, something which is great about them. So when they worship Allah, they are equating Him, they are equating this thing with Allah in terms of His His azama and His Rububiyyah. We'll stop here inshallah. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Any questions?
What do you say is related to ta'ween and mahabba?
Ibadah. Worship, يعني له ركنان. It has two pillars. At-ta'zim, glorification, and al-mahabba, and love. Yes. إثبات الاسم لله ونفي المثل عن, to affirm names for Allah, to affirm that Allah has a name and has names, and to negate from him a nafi, mithl, to negate from him an equal or one who is like him. Yes.
How did the controversies over the Sifat begin?
Yeah, that's a long topic inshallah, and time's quite short, but inshallah we'll speak about it next lesson.
So, you go for the ayah we read about the
I can't hear you, sorry.
You know the ayah we mentioned before,
Yes.
How could you like kind of measure up this ayah and the other ayah, like when can you use how do you like?
Well, what that other ayah is showing is that Allah's Izzah, greatness is dhati, yani is inherent to Allah. As for the greatness of the prophets and the believers, it's muktasab, something which they receive. It's not something which is inherent to them, rather it's something which Allah has blessed them with. So, فَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ جَمِيعًا, all the greatness is to Allah, meaning He is the source of all greatness. As for the greatness of the creation, of the prophets, alayhim salam, and of the believers, that is taken and received from Allah, that Allah has blessed them with that. So that's how you compare between the two. Yes.
It's about the last lesson, Mashiach.
Yes.
How do you combine between, let's say, an ayah that says, وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ, the other ayah that says, وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ.
Okay, we'll speak about that inshallah again when we come to Al-Qadr. We'll speak about Mashiach, it's literally about 5-6 sections later. We'll speak about it in detail inshallah. Okay, we'll stop here. Wallahu a'lam.